Go. Greetings and welcome to the Saroth the Mage Experiment. Tonight I have a very good friend of mine and a great guest, Derek Hunter from Los Angeles, author of the non-fiction magical books, Love, Chaos, and the other two, and also a fiction writer. So we're going to be talking a bit about both tonight. Derek, welcome.
Welcome, Steve. Very, very happy to be here with you. Very, very honored to be here and talking to you. It's always a pleasure whenever we talk in our personal lives. And then, of course, the videos that we did about recovery as well. So it's just, you're a good friend. And I hope that we meet in person one of these days.
Well, that would be fantastic, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So I thought we'd start off with just a brief description of, because before I even knew much about your fiction, I knew I'd read your Love, Chaos, and you kindly sent me the two books. Could you tell me a bit about that and how that came about and just all that stuff?
Sure. Yeah. It basically in 2014, I was going through a really hard time in my life. I was struggling with drug addiction, alcoholism, mental health breakdown. And I was considering joining something, just knowing that, and just from experience and not looking around at other people and how they were able to save themselves from the self-destructive aspect of addiction. It was a lot of times people were born again, Christian or otherwise, or they joined the 12 steps, or they did something. They basically adopted a belief system. And for me, as a agnostic for most of my life, and I've tried different things, including I was a Christian for a couple of years when I was around 19, 20. You know, I've always been very much a person who would throw myself into things very passionately, but I also embraced doubt, uncertainty. And I got this mostly from my dad. So it was difficult for me to just believe fully 100% in any belief system. And so I struggled with that. And it just, you know, in 2014, I felt like, well, I needed something. So I thought, well, why not create my own mythology, my own belief system, my own practice, my own philosophy, my own way of living. And I'd seen life as inherently chaotic and uncertain. And I also felt that it was very important to focus on love, love for myself and love for other people in a genuine way. So out of that, I thought, well, let me give a name to this. And I called it Love, Chaos. And so from there, I was writing down just ideas for it, things that came to me of what this philosophy meant to me. And I published a book, the first book of Love, Chaos, in that same year in 2014. And from there, it's evolved and grown as I became a counselor and you know, through my experience as a father, and of course, as a storyteller in my fiction. But yeah, it's evolved in a lot of ways since 2014, but that's when it started.
Do you still practice like ritual magic or any magical practices?
Yes, definitely. I had a really intense ritual that I did last year, which was a 6-day ritual, and which my last Love Chaos book, the last book that I published last year, which is called The End of the World. And that book was based on that 6-day ritual that I did, which was the intention of the survival and evolution of human beings, in the context of not the crisis of COVID, because when I first started it was before COVID happened, but the climate change, global warming crisis that continues to threaten our survival. So from that point, I did that ritual, and it took a lot out of me. And I
quite an intense ritual, if I remember rightly.
Very much so. And it was a process of a lot of invocation, scrying, and so a lot of prayers. So what I do, I haven't done a big one like that since then. I'm planning on doing another one for my next book, and for each year, doing one for each book that I publish. But what I do every day, I do rituals every morning, mostly based on prayers, because for me, it's very important to have a very intimate relationship with the entities I work with. And so I do that every morning, meditation and prayers. And in a lot of other areas of my life, I have a relationship with the entities that I work with.
Could you tell us who these entities are? Because I know they will also pop up in the book that we're going to be talking about later.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, sure. For a long time, even after I created Love Chaos, I worked with these entities even before Love Chaos. And I shied from telling people who they were. And depending on who I am around, I still continue to be shy about letting people know who these entities are.
You don't have to tell us.
No, that's okay. No, I have already told people, it's already in the book, so it's fine. Of course, here on this show, and certain people that I work with at my job are Christian, and it would be really uncomfortable knowing this about me, but that's fine. Even if they find out,
they'll never find my channel.
No. But yeah, I have a mythology that I created, and the mythology starts from no thing. And then out of no thing, there's the two male and female components that came out of it into existence. And for me, that's the male is chaos and the female is Babylon. Out of that was Lucifer. And so Lucifer represents basically all that is good and everything that in every human being in all forms of existence. The evil component to existence, and all these entities are borrowings from previous concepts, and I just sort of, changed them a little bit to suit my own way of thinking. But Charanzan, who was a figure in Thelema, Aleister Crowley, talked about him as being the Lord of the Abyss, the Lord of Illusion, and so he represents to me the denial of truth and the denial of reality, and even the denial of his own parents. And so out of that, kind of what I view it as basically insecurity, an insecurity that is at the heart of who Charanzan is. And just like Lucifer is sort of like his opposite brother, he and is in all of us and everything. I also feel that Charanzan is in all of us as well. So it comes throughout in our insecurities, our jealousies, our hatreds, and all of that. And so then below these figures, there's other entities that I work with as well. And again, that have historical, a birthplace. So figures such as Satan or Beelzebul or Orions or Baphomets or Pan, Astaroth and Asmodeus are the key ones for me. But and then there's others.
Some of my favorites.
Right. I know that you've worked with a number of these,
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, these are all representations for me. And again, being an agnostic, my form of agnosticism is being okay with the two different possibilities. Like all of these entities could be very real and have a real existence outside of my imagination, or they could be completely fictional and just be fragments of my imagination that help me in a psychological way. And I'm fine with either possibility.
That's what I really liked about your work. I've always been plagued by doubts about, and it's funny. I've been getting a lot of comments from people when I have on like Matt Hadfield recently, Steen, Calliston, these real spirit guys who absolutely believe in the objective existence of spirits. But there's a huge amount of people that are drawn to magic, but just find it very difficult to believe that they're actually, we've been brought up with scientific materialism and there are no such thing. And I'm going to do a solo podcast, not podcast, live stream, whatever, on that subject of doubt and magic, because
That's
it's very
great.
hard to stand in a circle with candles and incense. And for me, anyway, I'm getting better at it, but to totally believe that what you're doing is effective and not just some kind of weird psychological psychodrama, you know?
Well, that word right there you just said, I think is very important. I think the way I identify the practice of magic is very similar to theatrical performance, acting. In that when you act, because I've acted on the stage before, and went back when I was a filmmaker, I've acted in movies as well. And it's the process. It's something I think an actor can identify with, is that you throw yourself fully 100% into the actual performance of the drama that you're a part of. Um, and so, but it's a performance, and I think, but the really great performances seem as real as reality. And if
Absolutely,
you,
yeah.
and I think that when you do a ritual, I think one should fully, completely throw oneself into it with one's full heart. The doubt that I feel is important to understand is that you're okay with it. You know, it's okay with that. It may not, these entities that you're so passionate about may not really exist. You know, and and to me, there's nothing wrong with that. And then I also don't feel like, there's this tendency currently in the occult where there's sort of like anti-materialist, anti-science kind of trend, which to me I think is unhealthy. I think that we don't, people who practice magic do not to we don't have to be against evidence-based ways of living. I think people who pursue evidence as a means to understand reality is it's great. And materialism is not like an enemy to occult practitioners whatsoever. It's something that a person can embrace into your own life. It doesn't have to be in opposition.
Absolutely. So let's move on to you as a writer of fiction. When did you start? I presume if you're anything like me, you were writing as like a kid and a teenager, but when did the first novel you ever wrote crystallize, and how did you get round to getting those words? Because I know myself that it's incredibly hard to force yourself to write. So maybe not for you. I'm very lazy and confused most of the time.
Well, I
What's
think,
your method?
well, I have to be honest that when I first started getting into the occult, there was an aspect to it which is, whether it be with scrying or invocation, which I related to and I really liked, and was this sensation or feeling of being possessed. Um, and it doesn't have to be like in some kind of evil way or whatnot, or a full 100% possession, but you feel like you're actually, something else is inside you and is pushing you to write. That feeling I've had since I was a very small child. It came from being a drawing. Just wherever I went, people would always see me drawing superheroes or whatnot. And so I was just drawing constantly, and art was very important to me as a child. I was obsessed with drawing. I
Me too.
quit that. Huh?
Me too.
Oh, cool. Yeah, and your artwork is fantastic, by the way. I absolutely love and adore your artwork. And
Thank you.
I really really dig it. And if anyone watching this hasn't seen it, go check it out. It's really really great.
I'll send
Um,
you a painting sometime, Derek.
okay, cool, good. I would love that. I would, and but so it changed at some point around puberty. It changed, and I just decided to quit. I didn't want to be an artist anymore. I didn't want to. I was considered wanting to be a comic book artist, and I love comic books, and it changed. I'm not really sure what happened, but something happened in middle school, and I started writing stories. And then in my first year of high school, I took a fiction writing class, and the teacher was great. And that was also the first year I got into Shakespeare. I was introduced to Shakespeare and Homer, the Iliad and the Odyssey, and other stories. I was introduced to James Joyce. There was the teacher's assistant. She was in college. I had a huge crush on her, and she liked she liked my writing, and she said, "You write a lot like James Joyce. You should check him out." And I'm like, "I do? Oh, okay." So I started reading Joyce, and I fell in love with Joyce at that time. So really, like my real, true, like sort of explosion into literature was when I was 14. That's when I just had this whole world opened up to me. And I started writing short stories. I wrote a play. There was actually a play. It was called Chaos,
Hmm.
and it was based on a Van Gogh painting, the Night Cafe, which is
You've got it behind you on the wall, don't you?
well, it's actually that's the outside of it. There's another painting
Ah, yeah.
of the interior of Van Gogh's Night Cafe, where there's these guys who are around this billiard table and they're playing pool.
Yeah, I've seen it. I love Van Gogh as well as
Yeah.
and Modigliani, and you name them both in the book.
Yes. Yeah. Van Gogh is a very important person for me, and obviously for many others, you and millions of others. But yeah, that's when it first started, and then I got into filmmaking that same year. So I kind of put that to the side, and for like the next 10 years, I was into filmmaking. Then I made a feature film, and then I quit that, and I was a burnout on filmmaking, and turned my screenplays that I was planning on turning into features. Well, two of them, two feature-length scripts into novels, and those became my first two novels. But before I published those in 2012, I was writing a lot of short stories, and I was writing in a very realistic style. I loved realism and naturalism, and so I really wanted to express that. And then I was experimenting with a lot of drugs, and
Don't we
I
all?
you know, and that opened doors to me, and I started writing in a different style, which I called chaos riddled prose, and it's a very like surrealistic style, and that's what I continue to use to this day.
Yeah. Yeah. You kind of in Black. I was saying this before we came on, but the first few lines are very stream of consciousness, surreal, beautiful, flowing. I actually made a little note saying it was like you're almost sculpting with language. You know, it was like carving something out with these long strings of kind of nonsense words.
Mm-hmm.
But then you snap back really nicely into a more straight narrative, which really balances the book and makes it extremely readable and interesting.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, and that was my intention, and it was to balance, you know, surrealism with realism. You know, and the reason for why I do that, I distort language in that way, is that, you know, like with painting, and Burroughs, you know, William Burroughs even talked about this too back in I think the 50s or 60s. He said that, you know, with painting, there was a development. You know, there
That's
was
right.
a
Cubism. I think he was
yeah, there
talking
was a development in form, and that the purpose of this sort of like distortion of reality, you know, because it was to arrive at a deeper truth. So the subject, you know, so when artists were painting in the early 20th century and experimenting with form in all these different ways, from cubism to eventually to abstract expressionism, to all these different ways of expressing oneself, it was a way of expressing reality in its own way. And Burroughs thought that, you know, with literature, besides a few, you know, there was a few exceptions with Joyce and of course Burroughs himself,
mm-hmm.
the surrealist Andre Breton, that for the most part, literature was kind of a bit behind the development of the fine arts, and it was still kind of stuck in this realist way of telling a story. And it's still true. It's still true to this day. And I mean, for me, I have a really low opinion of modern literature. I really
Yeah.
feel that there hasn't been really anything that great in a long time. And
No.
certainly there is value. There's voices out there in the world that have a voice, and it's great to hear them. And they definitely have talent for sure. But I really feel like the really true great art has been expressed primarily in music and in cinema in the last 50 years. And it makes sense, you know, if you have you know, those are the two most popular art forms the last 50 plus years or 100 years. And that's where the really truly talented people are going to gravitate to, is creating music, popular modern music, very different genres, and then making movies. Movies have been where for the last 60, 70 years, it was
the dominant art form.
The dominant art form. Yeah. So it makes sense that we've lost a certain, level of quality in theater as well. And even in the fine arts as well too. I haven't really seen really great painters of the last 50 years either.
Do you think that's a negative effect of internet culture and no one really bothering to read that much anymore? Because we've got audiobooks and we've got, even I, who adore reading, I don't know, I still do read quite a lot, but, I'll often put on an audiobook on YouTube.
Yeah. No, it's definitely, I think it was happening before the internet though. It was certainly happening. I remember in the 80s and 90s, well, I was a kid in the 80s, but in the 90s for sure, there was a lack of interest in literature, and I think though, for sure, the internet, I don't think it's all bad. I don't think it's all bad for sure. But even prior to the internet, primarily people were interested in nonfiction. And that continues to be, people read these days for sure. People are constantly reading on their phone all the time, whether it be texts or posts or something. People are readers.
That's true.
People, are listeners too. People listening to podcasts or listening to books on tape or books on Audible. So I think language has not been lost for sure. Like, language is still very important to our modern day culture. But it's just that it makes sense that we're still kind of adjusting to this new culture that we have that is electronic. And I think it's going to take some time for people to adjust and get used to it, and then be able to settle down and appreciate, great works of literature, because it takes time to do that. And right now we're in a culture where that's abnormal. It's an abnormal experience to just sit down, stop everything else, and absorb yourself in a book. And especially a book where you're not getting information that you would be getting from a nonfiction work. I think people will eat up nonfiction because they're hungry for information. They want to learn, they want to know, which is cool. But the art of reading literature, like a story, and getting caught up and lost and swept up in a journey of a story, reading a great novel or a great play. I think it's going to take some time for human beings to get back into that experience again. And certainly people are doing it, but it's not, there used to be a time where people really took the time to enjoy great literature.
Yeah, indeed. So let's focus in on Black, which is the first of a trilogy. You've almost finished the second in the trilogy, which is White.
Right.
And then the third one is going to be Red.
Red, yes. Yeah. They're the colors of alchemy. Mm-hmm. And so White will come out later this year in August, and then Red will come out next year to finish the trilogy. But yeah, they're books that I've been working on since 2012. Most of my books, they take a long time I work on them for years. My first novel, I took about 12 years from the beginning for me to finally finish it. The other novel, Life, took about 8 years. And the short story collection, Black Light, White Dark, took about 6 years. So it takes a while for me to really, hash these stories out. But it first started out, and I had the idea. I like these classics from literature, which is Dante's Divine Comedy, the Faust legend, specifically Goethe's Faust is my favorite, and then also the Quest for the Holy Grail. My favorite version of the Quest for the Holy Grail is Parzival by Aschenbach, the German writer from I think the 12th century or 13th century. But yeah, these are classics of Christian European literature. And I love them just as I also love Dostoevsky, who was a great existential Christian author. And
I
my
love
first,
Dostoevsky as well.
yeah, Dostoevsky is brilliant, genius. My first novel, I, was loosely based on, inspired by his Crime and Punishment, but I flipped his philosophy upside down. So, so
You're always doing that, Derek. You flip everything, man.
so that's what I wanted to do with these stories. Like, okay, I love these classics, but they have this Christian philosophy that I don't agree with. So I thought, well, let me take the stories and completely rewrite them and invert them and throw them upside down with my own philosophy, with my own point of view on existence, and do it in my surreal style, writing style, and have bizarre things happen, but still grounded in reality. You know, I still like to have all my stories very much grounded in earthy realities and human relationships between people, very, realistic psychological portraits of people. Characters are very important for me. So as bizarre as things get, weird as they get, as weird as the language gets, I still very want to be faithful to psychologically true portraits of human beings. And that's what I do with these stories. But the black, white, and red, which are the colors of alchemy. So it also, I flip traditional notions of what those colors represent in alchemy. In alchemy, black represents a negretto, which is death or decay. And that's supposed to be the first starting point of an alchemical process. But in this version of the stories, black represents birth as creation. So there's a theme running through the story of creation, of a beginning. Then white, which is the book I'm almost done with right now, instead of the traditional perspective on the color white as being purity or innocence, it's the opposite. It's corruption. So the stories deal with themes of corruption. And then the last one, which will come out next year, red, the traditional color is seen as in alchemy, it's the final stage, it's the point of perfection. But in the stories next year, it will be about not perfection or finality, but evolution and a process.
Yeah, evolution is something that comes through very strongly, and it's something I'm also very interested in. I think part of the reason I got into magic was it's certainly Thelemic doctrine seemed to offer a way for human beings to evolve into the, the kind of Crowleyan Superman or the Nietzschean Superman almost.
Sure. Following one's true will.
Yeah. And
definitely, there's much to like about that. Very much so.
Yeah, and I think you do carry some Thelemic themes into Black. So could you give us like a brief outline of the characters and a little bit of the plot? You know, you don't have to go into the whole thing, but just give me a sketch. I was going to actually ask you to read a little chunk so people could get a thing, but I didn't do it. So, but yeah,
Okay.
just give us an outline.
Sure. So the story starts off with this character who's called Nothing Man. And it starts with him having sex with this younger lady.
Very well written sex scene, by the way. They're very difficult to write. It wasn't corny or cringy at all.
Okay, good. It's actually based on a real experience that I had. Yeah, and it was a woman I was involved with a number of years ago, who was I did change in the book. She's addicted to opium. In real life, she was a heroin addict. But the part that's not true is then they're suddenly visited upon about a spirit world being, a demon.
A hemathalot or something.
Yes, right. There was a name I gave to it that was, it's not from anywhere. It's just something I made up. And so the way that this demon comes into existence, it comes through the relationship between the two of them, between Nothing Man and this young woman. And it comes from the very uncomfortable feelings that come out when there is some mention by the young woman of her psychosexual traumas, come out from that experience. So this demon kind of, it latches on to her, and then it comes out in existence. This character, Nothing Man, is what is in the story is what I call a seer. And so a seer is someone who can actually see and interact with the spirit world. So he sees the spirit world constantly. And in the story, I talk about how in life there are people who do this, and it's so intense and so powerful that they can't really handle it, and a lot of them become schizophrenic and live on the street, and they just can't live a functional life. So in his own way, Nothing Man is able to live a quasi-normal life, and he's a poor guy just doing his job, and as a counselor, drug and alcohol counselor, as he struggled with addiction, and he has a son, and he's not with the
Firebird mother. Is the son,
and his son's name is Firebird. Yeah, and so he loves his son dearly. A number of years ago, he was discovered by this secret society called the Masters, that he had this ability to tap into the spirit world and see it and interact with it. So they basically propositioned him and also forced him by threatening his son's life to do work for him. So he works for them, and he does certain things for them. And one of the things he does was that there was an item that this young woman had that they wanted. So he actually goes and takes it from her after
the silver cup.
The silver cup. So anyway, so he goes on, and he goes to the Master's temple here in Los Angeles, and has an experience with them. Sees a ritual, is invited to a part that he'd never been to before, and they tell him that they need him to go on this journey to find this item called the eye. And from that point on, we no longer see Nothing Man. He's no longer in the story. He disappears. Then we jump to another story. So there's 3 narratives being told here. The other story is about this guy who he doesn't know who he is. He's lost, and he doesn't know where he's at. He's in this really bizarre alternative reality where there's weird creatures and demons.
The dark forest.
Yeah, he's in this dark forest, and he runs into these animals and creatures who talk to him. And then he eventually meets this character who's come to help him, and it's Austin Osman Spare. And Austin Osman Spare tells him who he is and where he is. And he's in this land, this alternative dimension called the Divine Chaos. And so Spare basically helps him. And he also has to find the eye. And Spare doesn't tell him what exactly the eye is, just as the Masters don't tell Nothing Man what the eye is. Then the third story is Faust. And it opens with God, or actually Choronzon, who is with his 3 angels, his favorite angels, and
his sycophantic angels.
Yes, very much so. And it's a very satirical scene where basically it's very dark satire on the concept of this sort of very tyrannical God, and probably in many people's eyes extremely blasphemous. So anyway, it opens with that, and Choronzon tells Mephistopheles. Mephistopheles appears on the scene. Mephistopheles is a servant to God, or Choronzon, and they're worried, or God is worried about Faust, because Faust has been working on for decades on the discovery of this ancient drug, soma, that his father had been working on his whole life. And he chanced upon meeting a stranger somewhere, and who told him about the missing ingredients that he needed to find to create this secret drug. This ancient drug, soma, has been discussed throughout the centuries, and it's a very mysterious drug. No one knows for sure what it is. Crowley has talked about it. Many other people have talked about it.
Terence McKenna thought it was psilocybin, of course.
Right, and so there's different theories as to what it is. So based on what I came across at the time when I was first writing this story, I basically decided it was some kind of substance that was it was a combination of some form of what one would call like in street terms, a speedball. So something that would both lift you up, like in an upper kind of way, and then also relaxed you in a downer kind of way. And you would have this intense feeling of confidence and basically feeling like a god, that all the insecurities that one feels in life would just sort of be so minor, and you would just kind of live life. You'd still have insecurities, but they just were so minor, and you wouldn't be dominated by them. And so Faust is basically views this as a form of liberation, that this drug is a way to liberate humanity from the chains of Choronzon. That Choronzon basically,
because you described Choronzon as being that sense of doubt and anxiety and fear, and Faust creating a drug that just gets rid of all that.
basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so Faust, once he gets this drug and he feels great and he feels like a god, he performs a ritual to invoke or evoke Lucifer. So he has an interaction with Lucifer, and Lucifer tells him that in order for this to really work, he needs other people. He can't do it by himself. So Faust basically, he has to figure out, like, well, who could he turn to basically join him in this revolution or evolution. And that's when Mephistopheles appears. And basically Mephistopheles' job, he's working for Choronzon, is to try to thwart Faust's mission. And in the end of the tale, and it's okay for me to let people know, because there'll be a lot more in the future books. The book ends with Faust and Mephistopheles making a wager. Their wager is, in this version of Faust, it's not about Faust selling his soul to the devil to gain power or knowledge. What he's doing, this character, this version of Faust is basically acting in defiance and saying that his soul, his spirit will not be crushed. And that the ultimate aim of Choronzon is to kill human beings' spirits, to give up on life. And Faust basically says, no matter what you're going to throw at me, I am not going to give up on myself. I'm not going to give in to you and allow you to dominate me. So that's where the story ends. Well, the whole book ends with that story's wager.
So throughout the novel, there's a doubling of, is Nothing Man who becomes black, who meets Austin Osman Spare. Firebird, it tells you that he's actually the reincarnation of Faust. Mephistopheles is also Baphomet.
Yes.
So, and also in the kind of weird, surreal landscape of divine chaos, I think Austin Osman Spare is a perfect guide, because his idea of neither, because everything in that place is neither one thing or the other, or it's both things at the same time.
Yes, you picked up on that. A really important aspect of the divine chaos and how it's different from Dante's Divine Comedy is that as Spare is guiding Black through this world of the divine chaos, as they see people and they interact with people, there are situations where there's two different aspects of the same thing. So there will be some characters who will be in Dante's version where they can't decide, they can't join a side, like a political group or a religious group or whatnot. In Dante's version of the Divine Comedy, he hated these people. He absolutely hated people who couldn't decide which side to join. So he really depicts them in a pretty horrible way. Dante's book is a great book. I absolutely love it. It's a work of genius in conception. It's beautiful. You don't have to be a Christian to enjoy it, but it definitely has a very specific philosophy and point of view, and believes that if you don't view the world as he does, then you're going to hell. And there's this, and there's all forms of torture and punishments for you. So, so in my version of the story, I wanted to show people who couldn't decide, some who are tortured by it, tortured by their indecision, tortured by their inability to choose a side, but then also others who absolutely enjoy it, who love not particularly belonging to anything. And I feel like that. And so as Spare takes Black through this world, they interact with people and see people who can, on one hand, be this way, and on the other hand, be a different way. You know, and there's a gate that they enter where Black and Spare go through this gate, and above the gate, it tells people to beware, but also invites them that this is a land of pleasure and pain, that there's both this and that. You know, and of course, Lucifer and Sharanzan are brothers. They are opposites that balance each other out. And so this notion of duality is very important. And you're right. It was one of the main reasons for why I wanted to have Spare be the guide through this land, because I couldn't think of a better person than him.
And bumping Aleister Crowley, I knew
yes.
when there was discussion of crossing the abyss, I thought, I bet Aleister Crowley pops up somewhere. He does briefly.
He does very much so. Yeah, and he actually is quite gracious, and he isn't particularly overly jealous about the fact that Spare was chosen and not him.
I mean, there's some really striking bits of writing in the book. The first one that I really loved was the character of Mother Mary, who is the mother of Firebird, your son.
Yes.
And you've just had this demon experience in your car, and you're 20 minutes late, and she won't let you see the sun because you're 20 minutes late. And to balance the surrealism and the weirdness of some of the sections with that stone cold realism, I think is fantastically effective. And it makes Nothing Man's character very sympathetic immediately.
Thank you. Yeah, it's very important, I think, to balance the two, realism with surrealism. And she of course, she is based on a real person. She's based on my son's mother, just as Nothing Man is based on myself. It's an autobiographical character, just as Black is autobiographical. A lot of the things he goes through are psychodramas. They're psychodramas of myself, things that I'm going through. And this next book, White, there's a lot of psychodrama stuff, things that I was going through at the time I was writing, things from my past, traumas from my past, things that I've done. And so it definitely, as bizarre as these stories are, there's a lot of very personal things there. And yeah, Mother Mary is I have a complex relationship to my son's mother. I've known her for 24 years. I knew her before my son was born as well. So she's a very important person to me in my life. And actually,
that comes across. I mean,
yeah,
you can tell she's a good woman,
Yes, she's a difficult woman, but a good woman. Right. And yeah, and obviously cares about her son, because as you know in the story, she fears for her life and his life when she gets these weird messages from the masters. So she freaks out and splits and runs away to Mexico, but only to have Firebird a number of years later have really bizarre transformations happen to him.
That's another fantastic scene. So Firebird has a kind of nervous breakdown in a way.
Yeah.
And his body starts to burn with these weird ethereal flames.
Yes.
And it made me think of my own adolescence. And you do kind of burn at that age with passion and desire. And, you're bursting out that child self and becoming an adult. And I thought that was a very good metaphor. I don't know if you meant it to be like that,
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's definitely what yeah, I wanted to express the in some kind of way the angst of a teenager. And in the next book, White, which is, it does a lot with a lot of a teenager's angst, some of it based on actual things that I've seen my son go through. Next month he's turning 16, which is the age of Firebird in the next book. So it certainly, yeah, it's certainly a very transformative time, so since alchemy is about transformation, I felt it was a good way to introduce the ideas of alchemy and relate it to actual personal experiences.
So have because there's some really personal stuff in there,
Yes.
almost like a ritual confession in some ways before you meet Minos.
Yes, yeah.
So is writing for you a kind of exorcism of these events from your past and your drug use and all that? Because after talking to you, I'm now thinking, right, I'm going to write my book, and I'm going to talk about all the shit I've done, bad, most of it, drugs, that stuff.
It's very cathartic. It helps tremendously. I think just the writing process in and of itself is therapeutic and cathartic. But then if you bring really deep pain and exercise those demons, I don't think you'll ever get rid of that pain. And in my earlier work, my first novels, I dealt even more so with my childhood traumas and pain, and also my teenage years and young adulthood. It was very much so about that form of it was a ritual in and of itself. That's writing these stories, and I think that's a natural tendency for writers to do that. I think you look at most writers, and it is a therapeutic process for them. You just so many writers down the line write about their personal demons, and it's a way for them to deal with it and live life. And I definitely am looking forward to your book, as you know.
If it
Reading your
gets
short
written, I hope
story.
it does. Honestly, I'm going to start any day now. I have written a little bit. You read Walter and Alistair.
Yeah, Walter and Alistair was fantastic. It was really, really great. The character development and the nuance, the way you describe it, just from the get go, I thought I was like in Nazi Germany, and then following this guy, and then him meeting Alistair Crowley and going to that party and meeting this young woman, Rita, and that whole, and then there's these other characters too. There's this guy, was his name Otto, who he rapes this woman.
Oh yeah, Otto deals. Yeah, he rapes Walter's mother, and yeah, it was actually, I was really flowing with that novel, but I was on heroin at the time, and I'd just been writing it on my laptop. I'd been uploading some of it to WordPress as it was going, and honestly, there was another 5 or 6 chapters where the plot was really starting to get intricate, and I was having to map it out on notebooks and stuff, just who was where, when. And then I swapped the whole laptop for heroin with the whole thing on it without really knowing or caring how to back it up or anything. So the great lost novel.
Well, it does feel like it could go somewhere else, but it also the way it ends with the Vril and what they're doing.
Yeah.
That's pretty intense. It's almost like, it could be just a short story too. It works. It worked for me. Reading it, what I read, it worked as a long short story. I guess maybe a
novella.
Novel. Yeah, novella.
Well, thanks very much, Derek. But we're not here to talk about my work. So let's think of where we can go next. So you're continuing the characters, yeah, so Firebird's going to feature heavily.
Yes.
Nothing Man, is he going to reappear?
Well, not in White.
Okay.
Not in White. Yeah, what the White is primarily, you're going to follow Firebird, and he's going to go through the spirit world. Basically, what happened to him was that he transformed to such an extent that he entered the spirit world. Yeah. So in Black,
he's already in the spirit world. He's in the beginning of it, and he meets that beautiful strange creature that's all.
Yes, he loses his virginity to a beautiful woman who's got the face of a squid.
That's autobiographical, I can tell.
Yeah, well, I hope but yeah, he and so there's a lot of a lot of these creatures that he meets in the spirit world are there's definitely some McGregor Mathers. He appears in the white, and a lot of the spirits from the Goetia appear. A lot of these other demons that I just created. There's stuff that Chiranzan appears, and there's a scene where Firebird, he meets Chiranzan in this white castle, right? And he finally finds Chiranzan because he's been told that in order for him to get out of the spirit world, he has to find Chiranzan. This is what these demons are telling him. But again, the theme of these stories is corruption, and how innocence is corrupted. And so there's a lot of lies and a lot of things that appear to be one thing, but are absolutely something else. And so constantly through the stories in whites, there's a lot of deception going on. So Firebird, and it's something that I think as teenagers, we begin to fully kind of do the beginning process of understanding how there's so much to life that is about lies and about deception and about untruth, that just as much as honesty and truth and reality is valuable in our experience, we find that deception is very dominant, and we come across it a lot. And I think as teenagers, we really start to see that about life.
Yeah.
And I think that's why teenagers rebel against their parents, against authority, against this, that, or whatever, because then they realize that so much of what our societies are based on are lies. And so it to me, it all stems again from my view of existence, as it stems from this character Chiranzan, who is very powerful and spreads untruths and lies throughout reality. And it's just what we have to deal with. It's just something that we have to deal with, and so these characters are fighting it, and there's this conflict, and you see that with Firebrand and his interactions with these demons in the spirit world. We see it also with Black. His name then turns into white when he goes into So as you go from book to book, his name changes. So white is going deeper and deeper into the divine chaos.
And he's still looking for this thing, the eye, which the masters have assigned him. That's his grail quest.
Well, that's what the Nothing Man was told by the masters. So what happens is in white, Chiranzan tells Firebird, in order for him to get back to his reality, he also has to find the eye. White is looking for the eye, because Spare tells him in order for him to get through the divine chaos, he also has to find the eye. And so this is in Black as well. Lucifer tells Faust that his way of finding the truth of existence, he also has to find the eye. So they're all in this quest basically to find the eye. And so yeah, there's a lot more psychodrama, personal stuff, characters that were based on people that I knew, my experiences with drug addiction, the romances that I had with different women, and also relationships that I had, traumas from my childhood and other youth come through in this story. Representations of different states of existence come through in the divine chaos and white. And then a Faust, of course, Faust's story then evolves into his going to his friends to basically tell them, hey, look, I have this drug called Soma, and it's going to change your life. And he says that he had an experience where he actually spoke to Lucifer, and Lucifer told him that in order for this to really work, he needs to find others. But his two best friends, Valdez and Cornelius, who were actually from Marlowe's Dr. Faust, his version of the play, they turn him down. They're scared. They think Faust has gone crazy. So Faust is kind of stuck. He doesn't know who to turn to. And then he and Mephistopheles get to know each other. A friendship kind of develops. No, it does. It develops. They become friends, Faust and Mephistopheles. And they run into this young girl on the streets of Wittenberg, Margaret. And Faust falls madly in love with her. And Mephistopheles sees this and he says, this is the perfect opportunity. This is what's going to determine the result of our wager. So Faust agrees with Mephistopheles and says, okay, let's do it. I'm in love with this girl. And so they go to this secret society in Germany that then leads them to a witch in Germany. And the witch does a love spell to get Margaret to fall in love with Faust. And so they do this, and then he's able to meet Margaret. And of course, so she falls in love with him. And so there's this ambiguity of whether is she really in love with him or is it because of the spell? But it's really passionate. They have this passionate love affair. And then I won't say what happens, but something happens.
Yeah. So it's interesting, and this is something that we've touched on in the recovery shows, which I hope we're going to do more of, by the way, that could you have written these books if you hadn't had the drug experiences that you have had?
I could have written them for sure. They would have just been different. I think if I hadn't struggled with addiction, I would have struggled with something else. They would have the focus, there wouldn't be that element, I think, to the stories. But it's hard to imagine that. I mean, they would have looked very different. I think it would have, I don't know, it would have just had a different take on life, and it's something that I think that anyone who struggled with addiction understands obsession. And I've been I've been very, obsession is a very big thing in my life. And so it's helped me motivate me to work on these books and to be really like gung ho on it. But it's had a downside too, for sure. And it's not just with my addiction to drugs, but it's also been problems in my personal life, as well. And so, yeah, it's hard. I don't know. I think it would be, I probably still would have written these books. They just would have been very different.
Yeah. I just thought it kind of strange that Faust's idea of evolving and liberating mankind was through a drug. And
exactly.
Now you're clean and you're a drugs counselor, damn it.
Right. Well, there's a twist to that, and that'll come out in the final book. So there's a twist to that drug soma.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I think we've just about done the hour,
Yeah.
That went too fast. So we're going to do some recovery shows in the future, hopefully, with Keats.
Yeah,
Shout out to Keats, and I loved his show with CW Chanter last night. That was great. I'm going to be doing a solo stream about this skepticism and magic and stuff. What I know you're writing and you're a drugs counselor. Anything else that you want to like either promote or the paintings that you've got in the copy I've got anyway.
So I've been very fortunate to have a person in my life. His name is Eric Fiazi. I met him in that same year, 2014, when I first started Love Chaos and was getting out of my dark period of my life.
Los Angelino.
Yeah, he's an older gentleman. I met him. He was a professor at Los Angeles City College, and I met him in a group dynamics class that absolutely opened my world up. And so we became friends, and he's a big mentor for me. Like he's definitely a mentor.
Beautiful paintings.
And so he to me is a genius. And he has struggled for his whole life to get the appreciation that I think he deserves. And he all his paintings are on the covers of my books, are on my websites. And so I'm really, and also in these books, Black, White, and Red, They are interior paintings as well, done by him. So yeah, he's definitely a great, great artist. And so he's definitely someone people should check out. And just as a reminder, if you're interested in my work, all of my books, both the stories, the works of fiction, and also Love Chaos books. I also even did some music albums.
Oh, I didn't know you'd done music as well.
Yeah, I did. I did music albums. Most of them are based on my books with me
Music,
reading.
film, plays.
Yeah.
Quite a renaissance man, Derek.
So, well, the music albums were basically me reading passages from my books, from the stories, set to electronic music. And then from there, I got really into it. I did an album of covers of from the band Coil. I did a number of songs of Coil. And then I did a really long album about Shakespeare where I read passages from Shakespeare set to electronic music. And then I did an album about Crowley's Thoth deck where there's 22 tracks, and each of the 22 electronic music sets are based on one of the major arcana cards. So there was a period where I was really into doing music.
Have you still got this? Can I have some? Can I listen to it?
Oh, the music?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, definitely. So on my website, which is love-chaos.com, there's a page on there. It says music, and all the albums are on Bandcamp, so
Fantastic.
people can check that out. And yeah, that was a lot of fun to do those.
You've also talked, I believe, about this doing a whole 78. Isn't it? You're going to write 78. Yeah. What?
So,
78.
I have a very ambitious plan for the rest of my life. Basically, so after I'm done with this trilogy, which is called the Story of Us All trilogy of Black, White, and Red, in 2023 will be the 400th anniversary of the first folio publication. So in 1623 was the first folio of the plays with William Shakespeare's name on them. And I've been, again, going back to obsession, I've been obsessed with Shakespeare since my teens. So in 2023 will be the first book about not Shakespeare, but about Ben Jonson. So what I've decided is that I'm going to write
his birthday today, you told me.
Yeah, and today is his birthday, right? Today is Ben Jonson's birthday. He was born in 1572 in June 11th. But yeah, I fascinated with that period of time. I actually believe that the works of Shakespeare, the plays and poems, were written by a number of different people.
Yeah.
And the main
this is
person.
A very, I mean, when I read, you know, it was taken for granted Shakespeare was Shakespeare, but then how did he have this, you know, the character William Shakespeare couldn't possibly have had the in-depth knowledge that's shown in the plays. You know, they're just beyond belief for a man of his kind of middle class origins. Right. You know,
based on the evidence, there's no there's no literary paper trail, and it's not because of the times. At those times there was plenty of literary paper trails where people left, and Ben Jonson especially. But even like really minor, obscure playwrights you could actually have, there was letters that they wrote, references to them at the time as being authors. And probably there's been no one more researched or studied about their life than Shakespeare. And they have yet to come across one piece of evidence to show that he actually wrote anything at all. The only thing that we have are 6 signatures, and they all look like there's someone that was written by someone that maybe had a hard time writing. He couldn't spell his last name. And nobody, you know, there's, so not to go into this whole theory, but it's really hard to believe that this man wrote anything. He was a businessman and he was very wealthy, and he did pretty horrible things to people. But
I didn't know that.
Yeah. In Stratford, there was a time where there was people that were starving to death, and he hoarded grain. And so he had grain, he had food, and he could have helped people out, but he chose not to. And there's other things that he did too as well that were pretty just like ruthless. He was a ruthless, cold-hearted businessman. That's what we have. We have, that's the evidence that we have. And so the name Shakespeare appears to have been, he was a front man for, so there's different theories. And I just come to the conclusion that the strongest possibility that was actually written by multiple playwrights, not any nobleman, not any wealthy earl or something like that. It was actually the playwrights themselves, which is what they did back then. They collaborated. But the main person I felt had the strongest sort of contribution to those plays was Ben Jonson, who, wrote the dedication at the beginning of the first folio. So anyway, he's a fascinating person. I highly recommend people check him out. And for for a couple of centuries, Ben Jonson was considered the equal to Shakespeare, if not better.
Yeah, I studied early modern literature at university, and yeah, Ben Jonson's a massive figure.
Yeah, so I'll be writing a trilogy about him, and then after that trilogy is done, I'll be writing 78 short stories, all based on the 78 tarot cards. So yeah,
wow.
and
That's
then
quite a project.
So there's other ones too. I want to write a novel about my dad, a novel about my mother, and by that time a novel about myself. And that's what I'd like to do. And hopefully I can get all of it done before I leave this earth.
You'll need to live to about 120, but I reckon you can do it, Derek.
Right? We'll see. Yeah.
Okay, I think that's a fantastic place to stop. Thank you very much. It's been a fucking fascinating show. When I click, you disappear, so I won't be able to like have a debriefing after the show. So thank you very much, Derek Hunter. You're my friend, so I see you all the time. So goodbye for now. Excellent show. Thank you very
so much, Steve. This has been absolutely wonderful. Definitely one of my favorite experiences in podcast interviews.
I've very much enjoyed it too. So thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
See you soon, buddy.